Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining. Once again, Mark and I. Today, we're going to talk about marketing analytics. Mark, how are you?
I'm doing great, Jim. Always loved having this conversation.
Awesome. Well, let's not waste any more time and talk about the problem with marketing analytics today. Apart from the typical macro challenges that we've discussed in previous chapters of silo, speed, and quality, the real problem we have is data today is kind of a rear view of exactly what happened in the past. There's no real intent data. We'll talk more about that later. And if anybody does have any real-time intent data, it's a dark science. And I'd like to talk more about that, Mark, as well. But what we need to know is what is happening now in real time. Mark, can you shed some light on some of those areas?
Well, I'll try to, certainly. The nature of the problem is, as you stated, that, analytics platforms, do a very good job of, BI or reporting or, developing some insight and allow you to drill down into things that have already happened and, hopefully stitch together, something that's useful out of that. The challenge when you're thinking about marketing, right, in that context is that they are primarily charged with creating rapport and dialogue in between their organization, your organization, what have you, around a problem, around an opportunity, et cetera. And the central challenge is that the information doesn't flow in a contextual way and allow the person to respond in a meaningful way at that moment in time. And so the dialogue becomes chopped or broken, and therefore the cadence of the rapport becomes interrupted as you're going along. And so the whole challenge here is that the information could be there but isn't flowing in a way that needs to be there. And then when you're trying to understand what's going on, there's a lot of vagarity in terms of what's actually being said and why it's being said.
If you could talk for a minute about why this is so important, the importance of a rapport and dialogue and moving from context-based analytics to drive context-based marketing. An interesting stat that I dug up was only 16% of marketing campaigns today are context-based marketing campaigns. That is staggering to think that 84% of campaigns today that are funded heavily are not in this day and age with all the data we have at our fingertips. So please talk about this, your reaction, and also, do you believe this is a table stake element of every marketer stack today?
I think everybody wants to be spoken to or engaged on a human level. And so absolutely, it's table stakes to be able to provide this level of dialogue or rapport in between two organizations or two people and what have you. I find that statistic staggering, you're right, but it actually doesn't surprise me. A lot of the time when we look at how people are, building their campaigns or their customer engagement, it's very linear, and it goes back to, how is this attached to a particular metric? And so, you get wrapped around the axle of saying, okay, well, I've got to move the number in this way, or as long as I hit the needle up, get it up into this level of the zone, I've achieved my objective. But it doesn't correlate or correspond to, the context of what someone is, trying to solve for, at that particular moment in time. And so, yeah, absolutely, there needs to be a much more concerted shift towards, context-based analytics, and what that means is, what is actually being said at a moment in time, but the meaning around it at the same time.
So in terms of the process, as usual, we always like to step the audience through what a process would typically look like.
Right.
Mark, can you walk us through how you would approach this particular challenge?
Yeah. And also just to say, the process here is, you can apply this with a lot of different, kind of solution approaches, and this can be used to help you scale linearly. It's not just a one-time approach, right? The first order, bit problem always is, the connectivity, access to the connectivity and the source data, but then also being able to, be able to quickly adjust. And this is kind of a fundamental difference around sort of traditional BI and data warehousing and so on, is being able to really adjust fast. The elements that are being used as part of the analysis and the analytics. That's kind of number one. And then number two is probably more of a non-functional or non-technical, requirement, which is just get very clear on the data that needs to be presented to the end user, the consumer of the information that you're presenting that to them, because it will change as time goes on and the dynamic of the market changes and so on. Then ultimately, once you have access to that, you're clear on the answer. We start, creating and deploying a services layer around that, a data services layer, which is a dynamic layer, which is responsive to the output as well as the inputs that are going into that, and then use that to drive the algorithmic approach to defining that answer, et cetera, that somebody needs. But then also, you think about where you really need to have this data, right? Does it need to be embedded inside of another application, a la kind of in a little side screen or a dashboard? Does it need to be its own unique data elements and so forth? How do you monitor that as it's moving through the applications as well? But generally, it's like, think about, okay, connectivity, what you need to answer, how it needs to be presented, create the layer, that is that the transient data is going to be flowing through and the enrichment is going to be happening to, and then monitor that. And then also just tweak your algorithms, because that's the piece that's really going to drive the value here, is the algorithmic approach.
There's two things I'd like to double click on. First of all, is a lot of stuff needs to be tweaked as you go. For example,
Yep.
the data that's needed, maybe the
Mm-hmm.
algorithms over time. The other thing that's very important when you talk about invisible data, just for the audience as well, I assume you mean this could drive process orchestration, trigger something else happening somewhere else.
Exactly. So, and it's not particularly deep, but it's meant to say that it's data that's hidden in the background that can either trigger another event, right? So it's a causality, right? So, for example, and I'll take a very primitive example, right? Like, say somebody uses a lead score, right? Back like they did in the good old days, and so you took a lead score, and if the lead score hit a certain number, right, then do something else. So if this, then that. The lead score may not have been presented in the in the outcome at all, but it may have triggered a series of events or actions to happen.
So, in terms of results, the big takeaway I see here is more decision support analytics at the customer engagement point. Can't stress that enough. And there's a way here to shortcut a lot of the complexity that exists with an existing analytics infrastructure to improve the overall experience. Can you take a minute to double click into those elements?
Sure. In terms of reducing sort of the analytics infrastructure, I mean, the short answer is you get to go direct. And so you're not persisting, the layer of data where you have to, move it into one place, then manipulate it, then move it into another place, then manipulate it, and so on and so on. It doesn't have to go through all these steps. Essentially, you're working with the data in flight, and you're really just paying attention to the algorithm that works with the data, not where the data is stored or how it's represented, and so on. And that gets you a tremendous efficiency gain. It also gives you a phenomenal level of flexibility that you may have not had before. In flexibility represented in being able to change how you're working with that data, change the data that you're actually working with, and being able to present it in multiple different environments quicker and faster. So it's a very different approach, and likely, you have components of this that you can leverage already.
And the big key takeaway I get also from what you just mentioned in the results is the importance of real time. And real time is critical in this day and age. You can't be contextual unless you have that real time element. So the takeaways that I see from this is analytics no longer has to come from an insights research analytics department, but as you say, you can go direct and get a real time result that you can use in your contextual based marketing campaigns. Every enterprise already has all the core components. All the data is there. It just needs to be brought together. And then having technology flexibility is key because you have to tweak things as you go. You have to tweak your algorithms. You have to tweak maybe your audiences or your segments you're going after, your campaigns, the type of data that's actually required. Is all of that fair to say? Those three key takeaways? And would you add any more or stress one in particular?
I think all three of those takeaways are certainly fair and accurate. It's much just like this conversation, right? You are saying something to me, I'm putting it in context, I'm associating it with other information that I know about, and responding in kind. That's how we should be doing, marketing or relationship building at scale with our customers and partners, et cetera. And we do have the data that's there needed to respond to that. We do have infrastructure that's there, that can be leveraged to deliver that. it just is it takes, willpower and a different approach to, solving these problems than people have taken in the past.
Well, thank you for all of that insight. It's amazing we did it all so fast. So next time I promise you a fireplace, maybe some hot chocolate, because it is the season
It
as we
is.
go into as we are now in December. But once again, thank you for your time, Mark, and look forward to chapter 10.
My pleasure, Jim. Always have a good one. Bye now.